In today's episode, a man rescues his wife from a venomous rattlesnake attack by severing its head with a shovel. While picking up the dead snake, it comes back from the dead to unleash its horrific revenge. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. This is the terrifying venomous snake attack on Jeremy Sutcliffe. Welcome to Final Affliction. There are 10 different species of rattlesnakes in Texas, all of which are venomous enough to kill someone unfortunate enough to come across one. Their venom causes the blood of the victim to thin to a dangerous level, damaging blood vessels and preventing clotting, causing death by internal bleeding. These kinds of bites need to be treated very quickly, or else the victim will die a horribly painful death, and, with antivenom hard to find, sometimes not even a hospital can save you if you are bitten by one of these creatures. Those living in Texas need to keep a special eye out for the Western Diamondback Rattlesnake, as it is the most common rattler in the state, responsible for the majority of the attacks on humans. With its vicious behavior and powerful venom, it is definitely an animal that most would want to avoid. 40-year-old Jeremy Sutcliffe lived a simple life, building a home for his wife and keeping her as safe as he could. They had recently moved to their dream house, and while his wife Jennifer worked as a nurse, he was in the process of fixing the house into their perfect haven. In May of 2018, the weather was hot as usual in Texas, and the couple decided that they would work in the garden together, as they often would on the weekends. Jennifer worked away from home and cherished all the time they could spend together at their home. They had planned on hosting a cookout in the evening for their daughter and her friends, and wanted everything to be perfect. Suddenly, Jennifer screamed as she had tried to pull at a weed. A huge Western Diamondback rattlesnake rose from the ground and threatened to strike her. She slowly backed away, screaming at Jeremy to help her. Thinking his wife had just seen a small garden snake, which were common and venomless, he nonchalantly walked over. Before he saw the truth, his wife was face to face with a huge venomous snake. His mind was racing as he realized that he was the only one that could save her, so he grabbed a shovel to defend his wife. He tried to pick the snake up by the tail in hopes he wouldn't have to kill it, but its hissing and lunges made it impossible. In fear of his wife and being bitten himself, he was left with no choice. He needed to kill the snake. With one smooth movement, he brought the shovel down onto the snake's body, severing its head from its body in one strike. He felt odd about seeing the snake still twisting around while separated from its head, but felt relief that the attack was over. With his wife now safe, they went inside to comfort each other after the harrowing event. 10 minutes later, Jennifer wanted to let her 2 small dogs outside to pee, but knew that it would be dangerous to let them interact with the venomous dead snake. She asked her husband Jeremy if he could move it out of their reach, and he agreed. As he walks over to the garden, he notices the snake had stopped squirming around and appeared to be dead. He picked up the longer half of the snake by the tail and dropped it into a grocery bag. But as he picked up the snake's head, it suddenly struck him, sinking its teeth deep into his hand and emptying all of its venom straight into his bloodstream. His hand was immediately flooded with intense pain as he started screaming for his wife, hoping that she would be able to help him. He could see the snake's body in the bag and could see that it was definitely dead, so how had it bitten him? This was a question that he could figure out later. Right now, he needed to get the snake off of him and go straight to the hospital. He desperately tried to pry the dead animal from his hand, but it was latched on tight with little room to move. He squeezed his other hand in between his skin and the snake's mouth, hoping it would let go. But that's when the second attack happened. As he managed to loosen the snake's grip, it suddenly bit down onto his finger, unleashing the last of his venom into Jeremy's system. He finally managed to tug the animal from his hand and flung it as far away as he could before it could attack again. He screamed out in agony. His vision was now going blurry from the venom coursing through his bloodstream, and he was sure that he would die. But his wife Jennifer had other ideas. She ran to the car and ordered Jeremy to get in, knowing that they only had a short amount of time to get him to the hospital, or else the venom would surely kill him. Jennifer was already on the phone to 911 as she drove, explaining what had happened and that they needed help. The hospital was 30 minutes away, and Jennifer knew that the hospital might not have the correct antivenom that would save her husband. The 911 operators were directing her to the nearest ambulance so that they could take him to the hospital as quickly as possible. Jeremy was fading in and out of consciousness and terrified. He couldn't see anything anymore and struggled to breathe. Suddenly, halfway to the hospital, Jeremy had a seizure. Still on the phone with 911, Jennifer received instructions over the phone to help him while still racing down the road. She pulled over beside a church in order to administer CPR to her husband. Finally, after a grueling 15 minutes, the ambulance and the crew arrived and quickly transported him into their vehicle before speeding off towards the hospital with the sirens blaring. After 10 minutes, the ambulance suddenly stopped, and Jennifer feared the worst, that her husband must have succumbed to his injuries. But Jeremy wasn't dead, not yet. Instead, they informed her a helicopter had been called to pick him up. His body was failing fast, and they didn't have the equipment to keep him alive. The helicopter arrived almost instantaneously and took Jeremy to the hospital, where the staff were waiting to save his life. Even though he was at the hospital, he wasn't out of the woods yet. His blood pressure was dangerously low, and his organs were quickly failing. The nurses had to work harder than they thought possible to keep him alive. Usually, when someone is bitten by a snake, they will be given 2 or 3 doses of antivenom. But Jeremy's condition was so bad that he was given a staggering 26 doses. Eventually, it was decided that Jeremy would need to be placed into an induced coma and put on a ventilator. Jennifer was horrified and felt that her husband would soon die, as his injuries increased in severity with each passing minute. They really didn't think that he would make it through the night, and Jennifer stayed by his side the entire time, watching his blood pressure and praying for it to increase. Luckily for her, after a heart-wrenching night, Jeremy's blood pressure finally began to improve the next evening until he was finally able to be woken from his coma. They were thankful, but he still had a long way to go until he would be healthy again. Despite the fact Jeremy survived the attack, the snake venom still had a devastating effect on his body, nearly destroying his kidneys and leaving him with lifelong problems like gallstones and extreme abdominal pain. When he first woke up, he had no idea where he was. All he could feel was the pain from his ordeal, but he was thankful to be surrounded by his family. As the snake had injected him in his fingers, the skin and nerves were severely damaged, and despite many skin graft attempts, 2 of them had to be amputated. Jeremy didn't seem to mind. He was just grateful to still be alive and be surrounded by his family during such a dark time in his life. After lots of surgeries and a very near-death experience, Jeremy Sutcliffe was released back home after a month of hospitalization. The family even threw a party to celebrate his recovery, and most importantly, the fact that he was still alive after such a harrowing experience. If a mammal loses its head, it will die almost immediately. But snakes and other ectotherms, which don't need as much oxygen to fuel the brain, can probably live on for minutes or even hours. Chickens have been known to live months without a head. In particular, the case of Mike the headless chicken lived for 18 months without a head. Snakes have been known to live for hours without heads, depending upon the species. A famous case in China was when a chef preparing a rare delicacy known as cobra soup was fatally bitten by the decapitated head of one of the snakes he had chopped up for the unusual soup. Now, after battling insane pain and losing 2 of his fingers in the attack, Jeremy knows to leave a dead snake alone, or else it might just get the final bite. He will never forget the day that a dead snake sought its last revenge and nearly brought him to his final affliction.